Welcome to Illuminate Universe's podcast, The Cast. Get it? The Cast? Okay, let's dive right in. My name is Lia, and I am a project manager and national lead here at Illuminate Universe. In this episode of Illuminate's podcast, I interview Sheilagh Croxon, who is an Olympic-level synchronized swimming coach. She talks about the advice she has for young professionals on how to succeed later in life and tells us all about her pathway to success. So before further ado, let's get into today's podcast.
Oh, hi, Sheilagh. I'm so happy to have you here today. I'm so excited to learn so much more about your journey. Thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me, Lia. I'm looking forward to it.
Great. So since we have a lot of really young listeners, I thought we'd start off by talking about the beginning of your journey, when you were going to university. Did you already know what you wanted to do? Like, what did you study? How did your post-secondary program relate to your goals?
Well, I started in university like many people, I think, just because it was sort of the thing to do, right? That's what you did. And I was a very, very strong academic student. So that was sort of the next logical step. And then I studied psychology. That was my chosen field. And at the same time as I began university, I also started to coach as a part-time job in a sport that I had trained in for many years, which was synchronized swimming, which now is called artistic swimming. And never intending to, fall in love with coaching the way I did, but very early on, within the first, couple of years, I really realized that, I had a gift. I kind of say a dream caught me, and I was like, I would love to make this my life's work. So, actually, halfway through my degree, I went to my parents and I said, I think I found what I want to do. And I want to dedicate myself completely to being the best I can be at this. And, I think most parents would have said, you're crazy. You've got to stay in school. But my dad turned to me and he said, I believe in you. How can I help you? What do you need? And so I think, had I not heard those words, I definitely wouldn't have had the courage to jump and do what I did. So that's kind of how it all started. And I never looked back. So, although I continued to do a little bit more university study, it was always related to pursuing my coaching dreams and my coaching education. So I can tell you what I did from there, but you might have another question at this point. I don't know. I can continue, or you can go ahead and ask another question.
I mean, I have a couple comments just because I feel like I can relate to you so much because I'm studying psychology right now.
Yeah.
So it's so interesting. So that's super cool how you also studied psychology. I also grew up competitively swimming. So that is another kind of cool thing we kind of have in common there.
Yeah.
I love it. And it kind of actually does a bit bring me to my next question. You kind of already touched upon it. So, growing up, a lot of times we kind of set clear plans for ourselves, but things don't always pan out that way. So how did your kind of your professional journey and career compare to the plans that you originally had? You started off in psychology. What was your goal there? How did it change?
I don't think I really knew at that point. I think I was just interested in the subject. But, when I started to coach, I just sort of felt like a calling. I felt, and I had instant success with it too. So I was coaching, young girls, and their progress was just amazing. And so I just really felt like I just fell in love with the work. And so I think that, then I started to research, okay, well, is it possible for me to make this my career? What if I do, set high goals, like wanting to be a really top coach, working at the highest level of the sport, how do I get there? And there wasn't a clear cut pathway, but like I did stumble upon some very interesting things. One being um, an apprenticeship offered through the Coaching Association of Canada at the time, which was a grant given to 14 coaches across sports. So not, not in my sport, like across all sports. And so I contacted the national coach at the time in my sport, who was from Calgary, and she was one of the best coaches in the world. And I said, I would really love to apply for this long-term apprenticeship grant, which was a year of study, and I would move to Calgary and study under her. And I said, would you support my application? And she said yes. So just asking that question, like doing that research, asking that question was really key. And then I was successful in being awarded the grant. And so, in my early 20s, I picked up and moved out to Calgary and studied under her for an entire year. And that was just amazing. What they say, and I think this is a really important piece of information, is that if you decide you want to do something, go and sit at the feet of a master. So you go and you find that person who has the knowledge that you want to acquire or is doing what you want to do, and you learn from them. And so I had that opportunity, and I think that probably, in hindsight now, cut off 10 years of learning that I would have had to do through trial and error, making my own mistakes. What I learned, about the techniques, the strategies of my sport, it really fast tracked my career, but my knowledge. So I think that's a really important piece to remember. If you have, idea about something you want to do, go and find that person who you can learn from and sit at their feet and take it all in. And then, the worst thing that can happen is you find out this isn't what you want to do, but then you're going to have another answer and you can pursue something else.
Yeah, I love that. That's like exactly in line with kind of our philosophy here at Illuminate. It's very much learn the things that matter from those who have done it. So it's really like learn by doing, and like getting that mentor and having them really like help you along the way and like show you. So now that we've kind of started like talking a bit more about you being, or your journey towards being an Olympic coach, tell us like what it was like when you like coached your first like team in the Olympics. I'm so curious.
Well, the first time I went to the Olympics, I was an assistant coach. So I was working under a head coach, and that was, it was a great experience. Everything was a learning, but that was a hard experience because I had my first child. So, and he was like, when my career sort of opportunities and, my family having kids kind of peaked at the same time. So my son was 1 year old, and we were told that the team was going to centralize in Edmonton, and she was from Montreal and I was from Toronto, and nobody wanted to go to Edmonton, but that was the decision of where we had to go. So we picked up and moved out there, and my husband took a leave of absence from his job and came along and took care of my son. So he was amazingly supportive of my career. But it wasn't an easy year. We had a very different leadership style, the two of us, and probably very different values as well. So it was a challenging year for me. Because I was in an assistant coach role. But what I learned in that year was a lot. I had so many lessons given to me about leadership, because even though she led in a way that I wouldn't have, I don't think if I had had the experience working under her, I would have been able to go on and lead in my next Olympic Games as the head coach the way I did. So it really helped. Even though it wasn't a really positive working experience for me, it was really, really important for helping shape the coach that I eventually became. So I always say that's another really valuable lesson, is sometimes in those really difficult situations, you learn the most. and it helps you down the road. So even, if you're in a situation where you don't really, sync that well with the person who's supervising you, sometimes the lessons that you learn from that experience are so transferable that when you have
Mhm.
the opportunity to be in that role, you can be that much more effective.
Yeah, it just goes to show how in a team, like sometimes you might not always like get along with everybody, but all of your different point of views put together can like sometimes be the best. And like you guys really can come together to like use so many different perspectives to come up with the
Absolutely.
best outcome. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I that's one piece of advice that I always give to coaches or to leaders is
Hmm.
you never want to surround yourself with yourself. You really want to surround yourself with people who challenge you,
Yeah.
people who think differently, because that ultimately, helps you strive towards excellence. So conflict is not a bad thing. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot in that first experience that really helped shape me going forward.
Yeah.
Mm.
On the topic of leadership skills, I just want to hear like why they're so important in your role and like how you've used them throughout the years.
Well, I think, every leader has a different philosophy,
Hmm.
but, you know, having strong leadership skills, I think, always working on your communication skills,
Hmm.
it's just so vitally important. But I think the biggest ones for me is, for a leader, it's being able to, inspire people towards a vision, right? So taking the time, working with your team to talk about what that desired future state looks like, and then creating the culture around that, with values that support you getting there. And when you can really get down to the level of, living your values, so they're not just something that you do one day and you put them on the wall and then everybody forgets about them, but you really, um, you think about, what would I hear, what would I feel, and what would I see in our environment if the
Hmm.
value of respect or the value of, honesty, whatever it is, was being lived in our culture. And I think when you can get to that level, of living your values, then, leadership becomes a pleasure because everybody is, in tune with working towards, that vision, and supported by those values.
That was incredibly insightful. Very different, not different, yeah, a bit different from how I think. So that's really cool. It's like a new
Mm,
perspective.
mhm.
Another question for you would be if you kind of had like, do you have one big overall takeaway from your time being an Olympic coach or anything that really sticks out?
That's a really good question. It's not an easy one to answer. But I think, I'd have to say just really committing to the teach what you need to learn most. That's one of my big
Okay.
fundamental pillars. So, I think there was times, in my journey where I struggled with my own confidence, like whether or not I could do this, whether or not I could handle the pressure. And so I was always, looking for ways to learn, to increase my confidence, to grow. And then I ended up teaching those same skills to my athletes, which then helped them grow. So I think, if you can be honest with yourself about where your, limits are or the things that you need to work on, and then, not being afraid to be a little bit vulnerable in terms of,
Hmm.
like talking about those things, and then, teaching when you learn something, like teaching that, to your team or to your colleagues, sharing it, it just helps you grow even more. So I think when people can see you as genuine and authentic, and human, that just builds trust and, creates a really good environment.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought up the part about there was like moments where you doubted yourself. Like as a young professional, like starting out in her career, and I do get nervous sometimes and I'm like, am I going to be
Mhm.
able to do it? Am I going to be successful one day? So it's kind of nice to know that someone like so successful as yourself also had those doubts at one point in time. And
Yeah.
it's pretty comforting. And I'm sure the students listening, like, they'll definitely find comfort in that, knowing that, hey, that's okay to sometimes doubt yourself. Just don't give up. Like, you got this.
Well, our sports psychologist always used to tell us, he used to say to the athletes, you don't wake up one day and say, like, thank heavens, confidence came to me in the night. That's not how it works, right? It just doesn't come out of the blue like that. Confidence
Mm-hmm.
comes from putting yourself in situations where you're actually afraid, where you don't feel 100% confident, faking it a little bit till you make it, right? And then you kind of look back and you go, oh my God, I did that. And then your confidence goes up a notch. So it's those little things, right? Just building
Mm-hmm.
all the time that really, really, and then you
Yeah.
turn around one day and you are confident doing that
Yeah.
thing. It's like you don't have to think about it, but it does take time and it is a process.
Yeah. It's almost like a muscle. You got to work it out, and then eventually you get stronger and stronger and stronger. I love
Absolutely.
that.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
And
good.
my last question for you as we come to an end: what is one piece of advice you would give to future aspiring business leaders to be successful in their future careers and personal life, even?
Wow. One piece of advice I would have to say, just to commit to that continual journey
Mm-hmm.
of growth. So just keep increasing your knowledge, keep learning, right? The moment you stop learning or you stand still, things become stagnant, right? So just embrace, there's so much out there to learn, and just keep growing. And I think that if you do that, you're going to be successful at whatever you choose to do.
I love that. And I will definitely be keeping everything from this conversation in mind and use that throughout my future career. I want to thank you so much for being here with us today. It was so lovely chatting with you. I learned a lot, and I'm really, really excited for our listeners to be able to hear this episode.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure. Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.